What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and welcome back to the 32-team 7-round mock draft series here on the channel. And today, we're going to be taking a look at a team that has the 8th overall pick in the first round, and that is the Detroit Lions. Mr. Matt Patricia, they've been, they've made some all right moves, I think, in free agency thus far. They brought in Danny Amendola, not bad. Jesse James, all right, like some guys that are not going to be expensive tier free agents that could contribute in more than one way for the Detroit Lions next season. That's on the offensive side. On the defensive side, we got in Justin Coleman at nickelback. That's a nice little piece of business. They do need a new nickel corner, and they got one. And then, obviously, paying a lot of money to bring in Trey Flowers from the New England Patriots. Obviously, I don't want to say vastly overpaid, but they definitely overpaid. But he should be a big-time performer for that defense. And you look at Trey Flowers, you look at Deshaun Hand, you have Aquara. I mean, maybe add a little bit more depth to the draft, and that is a healthy defensive end rotation. So how are we going to help them out in this mock draft at pick number 8? Well, we're going to start here and have them select Greedy Williams, cornerback from LSU. I think he's the best cover cornerback in this year's draft class, and I think he's an excellent pairing with Darius Slay. I think right now you look at the cornerback room for the Detroit Lions, at least on the outside, and after Darius Slay, there's not a lot there. You got Tabor, the second-round pick in 2017. As much as I want him to pan out, he just seems like he's not going to pan out. They got Mike Ford, Jamal Egg. Like, there's just a bunch of guys there. They desperately need another starter right away. And when you look at the first round, especially when they're picking number 8, I think, Byron Murphy to an extent, but I definitely think Greedy Williams is the most likely out of all the cornerbacks this year to be able to handle a starting job as a rookie on the outside. I think, therefore, plus Matt Patricia will be able to coach him up. I think we've seen a bunch of guys that have played well under Matt Patricia, obviously going back to the New England Patriots, but through his early career here with the Detroit Lions that have played better under him than they have elsewhere under other DCs. So I think that he has that going for him. We look at the negatives at Greedy Williams. He doesn't like to tackle, but I mean, a lot of people in the scouting community, you could see it on tape. Kind of looked like he made some business decisions in college where like he could probably pop a guy or chip a guy in here and doesn't want to, risk getting a concussion or hurting an injury. And I mean, that kind of makes sense in one way, but then another way, how's that going to help him in the NFL? He's going to be like that, playing for a new contract in the NFL. So that is, the only red flag you can have around Greedy Williams. Other than that, man, he is an A+ cornerback prospect. He's as good of a cornerback prospect that I've seen in quite some time. And I think when you look at the Detroit Lions depth chart in the secondary, Darius Slay and Greedy Williams sounds like an absolute juicy tandem in that secondary. Moving into the second round, continuing to add to the secondary, at pick 43, I'm selecting Tailor Wrap, safety from Washington. He is your traditional safety, and I think Matt Patricia can really move him all over the field. He can play free, he can play strong, he can play in the box, he can play money backer. He had a pretty good combine, didn't run a 40, but looked really, really good in the on-field drills, and he has like uber production at Washington. Man, this guy here is an absolute leader and the kind of player that Matt Patricia doesn't really have in his defense. He doesn't have that, Patrick Chung, Jason McCourty type guy. Obviously, they're different type players, but that leader in that back end of the secondary. And, you call Darius Slay, it is what it is. But you know what I'm saying? I just feel like the leader in the secondary usually just has to be a safety, the hard-nosed safety. And they don't really have that to that defense. And a guy like Tailor Wrap will bring that right away as a rookie. I think he'll be able to start at strong safety, upgrade over Miles Killebrew. I think he's probably the best safety on the team. They don't really have a terrific cover safety. But, you would assume Quandre Drake's converted corner is going to try and fill the void, or the Devin McCourty role, if you will. But who's going to be that Patrick Chung? And I think a guy like Tailor Wrap can do it. He is an A+ tackler for the safety position in this draft. He's above average in coverage. But like I said, if you had to take a coverage trade, I don't think he's that much worse than Quandre Diggs, who's clearly designed to be the cover safety there in Detroit. And I think he's a day one starter. I think he changes the identity of the secondary just a little bit. They get a little bit better, a little bit more hard-nosed. And a Tailor Wrap is definitely a Matt Patricia type guy. Moving into the third round at pick 88, I'm selecting LJ Collier, defensive end from TCU. He is ideal size for that multiple front that Matt Patricia wants to run. 6'2", 285, can move inside, can move outside. He had a pretty good combine, a 4'9", 140, 25 reps on the bench press. I think right away he can come in and immediately affect the run by setting the edge and then form a healthy rotation with Trey Flowers, with Deshaun Hand, with Aquara. I think they actually just gave him a brand new contract. But again, I think we're seeing more and more teams trying to continue like, oh, why are we drafting defensive end? We just paid all this money to Trey Flowers, and Deshaun Hand was a steal last year in the 4th round, because you need that rotation. You want to just have waves after waves after waves of bringing in the pressure to try to affect the pass. That's just how the NFL works in today's climate. And the Detroit Lions need to add just a little bit more depth. And I think in the 3rd round, Collier, because of that flexibility as well to just kind of move all over the line depending on what kind of play call Patricia wants, that is even extra value to landing in Detroit. Moving to the 4th round at pick 111, I'm selecting Gary Johnson, linebacker from Texas. He had an absolute huge combine running a 4.43, but he is undersized. He's not just like some freak of nature 6'4", 245, you know, that traditional size you think at linebacker. He's like 6 feet, 6'1", 225, 230. But I think because he's an undersized cover linebacker, sideline to sideline, that's kind of what they're lacking here in Detroit. And now, I know Jared Davis, I'm a big fan of him, obviously in Florida. It seems like he kind of was a little bit out of place, had a less than ideal adjustment period to Matt Patricia's defense. I don't know if he was able to put it all together. I remember the first Detroit Lion game I watched, though, last year. I think it might have been the Jets game. He was getting picked on in coverage. So I don't know. He could be one of those guys that could find himself being an odd man out there for Matt Patricia. But, you know, Matt Patricia, you need to have that sideline-to-sideline ability, which Jared Davis isn't. That's not the strength of his game. And a guy like Gary Johnson brings that in immediately. So either view it as depth, view it as, you know, a changing of the guard, changing of identity, changing of play style in this linebacking core as Matt Patricia finally and slowly can start getting his guys back there. But I think either way, worst case scenario, you get a very strong special teamer in Gary Johnson, much needed depth pretty much anywhere at linebacker. You could play him inside, you could play him outside, and because he's underrated blitzer with that speed, you know, as long as you don't have to rely on him getting off a block, which, I mean, a lot of times you have a free runner if you bring an extra linebacker on a blitz, that is where Gary Johnson is going to make a lot of money as a rookie for the Detroit Lions. Moving into the 5th round at pick 146, I was selecting Isaac Nauta, tight end from Georgia. You know, I think you got to try to afford a tandem here with Jesse James. Jesse James, even though they paid him all right money, you know, he hasn't really proven himself to be that solution at tight end that the Detroit Lions so desperately need, that are so probably desperately burned that Eric Ebron went to the Colts and played very, very well. He played like that first-round pick that they drafted him. But you look at the last couple, you know, high-level tight ends the Detroit Lions have brought in, they just haven't worked out. You know, before that, you had Brandon Pettigrew, who was like a first-round pick. He was a bust. So I think, you know, start looking in the mid-rounds. Drafting well at the tight end spot could help him out. Isaac Nauta was projected to be maybe a 3rd-round tight end, but slipped after a very, very, very poor combine, where he was running like, he was like a 4.8 or something like that. He's like one of the slowest linebackers, but looked very good in the drills. You look at his tape, he is, I think, as complete of a tight end as you're going to get in the 5th round in day 3, because he's an underrated receiver, because obviously they don't throw the ball a whole lot there at Georgia. He's a very sound blocker and kind of can bring that safety net just in case Jesse James doesn't pan out. Worst case scenario, he could take over for him right away. Best case scenario, that is a healthy tight end tandem between Isaac Nauta and Jesse James. Moving into the 6th round, where they have 2 6th-round picks. First up at 184, I'm selecting Jacoby Myers, wide receiver from NC State. He is a big slot in today's NFL at 6'2", 205. He had a lackluster combine, so that will have him slip here just a little bit, but he does fill a need here for the Detroit Lions. They did bring in Danny Amendola to be their slot wide receiver, but he's made of glass. Let's call it what it is. He has a big issue staying on the field and staying healthy. So when you look at the depth, who can fill in when and if he gets hurt? You have Brandon Powell, former Florida Gator, but he's more of their gadget type player on offense. So a guy like Jacoby Myers can be that top depth at slot wide receiver, as well as he just adds a different dimension. If you want to have a slot play where you have a big slot, he can fill in, and Danny Amendola can rest on the sideline, or you can find another way to get him involved. But I think I know there's a lot of upside here with Jacoby Myers. He's a converted quarterback, but still last year at NC State, he had 92 catches, 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns. So you can build upon that. And the fact that, like I said, he adds a dimension to the Detroit Lions wide receiver room that they don't currently have in the 6th round with that upside, that is a very decent pick. Going to their 2nd 6th-round pick at 204, I'm selecting Terry Beckner Jr., defensive tackle from Missouri. He adds much-needed depth to the interior defensive line there for the Lions. He was a super high graded, recruited high school recruit. I think he was like a 5-star, one of the highest 5-stars ever. And he had a pretty decent college career with Missouri. Never really took off to the superstar expectations that maybe were coming with him from high school, but still had a really nice career, and I think he should be a nice rotational defensive lineman here in the NFL. I think he had an average combine, plus really the strength of the draft class has him here in the 6th round, where I think it was another year he could be a 4th round, 5th round. Some people are trying to gamble that, oh, hey, maybe we'll be able to transition him back to that highly regarded high school recruit. But it just is what it is down. These guys are going to slip. We're going to see a lot of interior defensive linemen slip, whereas if it was other years, they would have went earlier. But I think Terry Beckner, when you look at the interior defensive line here for the Detroit Lions, you got A'Shawn Robinson, you got Snacks Harrison. What else do you really have after that? Like I said, they run a multiple front. You're going to have some of these bigger defensive ends like Deshaun Hand and Aquara be able to rotate in and out. Hopefully, LJ Collier in the 3rd round. But a guy like Beckner as well brings that versatility, and I think ultimately is a great fit for a multiple front. Going to the 7th round, where they have 2 7th-round picks. First up at 224, I'm selecting Donnie Lewis Jr., cornerback from Tulane. Adds nice depth and special team ability late. Donnie Lewis had a nice career at Tulane. The last 2 years, 90 tackles, 5 interceptions, and 26 pass breakups. So I think you can look at a guy with his size, he probably can play outside. I think when you look at his tape, looks like a guy that more so can play inside. But, you know, you're looking in the 7th round, especially when you're looking at mock draft, you're going to try to find what guys can potentially crack the final 50. Because I don't really want to be mocking in the 7th round guys like, oh, clearly he's going to go on practice squad or stuff like that. I want to try my best at this point in the mock draft to find guys that can squeeze on to the 53 roster. I think Donnie Lewis can. I look at the 4 last depth at cornerback here on the Detroit Lions. I'd rather Donnie Lewis than them. So I think there's a legitimate shot because of his production, because of what he can bring to that cornerback room and special teams. He can crack a spot on that final 53 after training camp. And then finishing up in the 7th round at pick 229, I was selecting Jordan Tiamo, quarterback from Ole Miss. Now, Tiamo is one of the more polarizing quarterbacks in this year's draft class. And I think ultimately he's a nice flyer to come in and be Matt Stafford's backup. He's shown plenty of flashes throughout his college career. Sometimes he throws, terrific mechanics, great footwork, great pocket presence, and other times it goes to shit. And ultimately, you have to have big-time questions about a guy that had pedestrian to above-average stats with DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, DeMarcus Lodge, Dawson Knox as his receivers last year at Ole Miss. So, like, there's some concerns there, but ultimately, when I look at the Detroit Lions, you got Connor Cook currently on roster as your backup for Matt Stafford. I think a guy like Tiamo comes in, competes for that spot, maybe ends up on the practice squad, but ultimately in the 7th round, trying to find maybe some depth here for Matt Stafford. I mean, there was the audacious trade rumors that were going around, which I don't think there was much context, much feel to them about Stafford potentially being on the trade block. But, it's in the 7th round, trying to get a cheap option here for a backup with maybe some potential upside. Who knows if he can put it all together. So there you go, guys. That is the 7th round mock draft here for the Detroit Lions. Let me know in the comment section below, especially if you're a Detroit Lion fan, if you agree or disagree with this mock draft. As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, special like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.